And again, I'm not being critical. I'm just being cautionary. Do you have a crowded franchise marketplace?
What do you think that franchisors should be showing in their item 19?
Now, what you're bringing up is something that bothers me, which is...
Welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, and building your empire doesn't happen overnight. My name is Tarek Johnson, and owning franchises is what helped me go from employee to employer and start building my empire for my family. So this podcast is for you, the empire builders. For those of you who want to build something that stands the test of time. This is for those of you who are crazy enough to believe that you can make the dream in your head come to life. This podcast is all about bringing you real people who are building real empires so you can get inside their mind and heart and get proven strategies and actionable insights that will catapult you to build, grow, and scale your empire. So how do you build a successful franchise with happy and profitable franchisees? It's probably the most important question you can ask yourself if you are a new or even an established franchisor. So in this episode, I got to chat with Charles Internicola, who is a highly respected franchise attorney with a specialty of helping entrepreneurs franchise their business and helping franchisors grow and scale. He's worked with some very, very successful franchisors. Now, we talked about the difference between franchisors that are successful or not. We talked about red flags that franchise buyers need to look out for. So you potentially as a franchisor or someone looking to franchise your business need to understand it from that perspective. We talked about the roles of FSOs, franchise sales organizations, and how many franchisees that you should be selling the first couple of years. We also talked about the infamous item 19 and how franchisors and franchise buyers need to approach it. Now, you've probably heard about EOS and Traction. It's a highly effective business operating system for owners and CEOs to run a well-structured and successful business. I've been on leadership teams that used it, and we currently use a lot of the systems of EOS in my business today. If you want to learn more about EOS and how it can help you run a tighter and more successful business, shoot us an email at info@tarekjohnson.com, and I can introduce you to the EOS implementer that I've been connecting with. Other than that, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Franchise Empire Show. I've got Mr. Charles here, a fellow YouTube celebrity. Welcome.
Yeah, this is like my first collaboration. I get to meet you in person and watch your YouTube videos. So fun stuff.
Yeah, that was cool when we met last year, because it was like, oh, I know you, I've seen your videos, and then it was like likewise. So kind of that's the weird part about YouTube and content, right? It's like you feel like you know someone before you ever meet them. Have you had that experience a couple times?
It's been the greatest experience because for everyone on your channel and everyone on our YouTube channel, it's the most positive experience. We get gifts in the mail, we get beautiful comments, and it's great meeting up with people in person. What I love too is, as a franchise law firm, we have a lot of our clients on our YouTube channel. So when we have events and our clients recognize each other from watching their videos on YouTube, it's great. It's great to see the connections.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is that? It's interesting because I want you to tell us in a moment, and for folks that may not be familiar with you, who you are and what you do. But let's start there, and then I have a follow-up question after that. So your law firm, who do you work with? What is your specialty, and who do you serve in the marketplace?
Yeah, so like everyone listening to this, right? Whether you're buying a franchise or a franchisor, you're going to be running a business and you're going to be questioning, like, what's the purpose in life in your business? And so Internicola Law Firm, we're a franchise law firm. We just represent entrepreneurs, franchisors. So people are franchising their business and emerging franchisors that are looking for guidance, improving their FDDs, getting on a better pathway. And along the way, following what other entrepreneurs do, whether it's story brand and strategic planning and traction. Years ago, our team had a strategic meeting and really challenged ourselves on, why are we a better option for certain franchisors, emerging franchisors? What is our positioning? And it led us down a pathway where not only do we provide those legal services, but as added value, we're building an ecosystem around our clients, their resources with their branding, their franchise positioning. And so when someone does ask me, hey, Charles, what's the advantage of working with your firm? 9 out of 10 times I could say, well, the other firm you're talking with, they're great people. And they are, there's a bunch of great people out there in the franchise community, but here's some things we offer that may be of value. So we're a franchise law firm, but we do get involved in the franchise development. And most important, our clients they're brand builders. And so we built an ecosystem around them.
Yeah, which is really, yeah, it's really cool. I mean, when you were telling me about some of the kind of the value adds and ways that you guys contribute and help franchisors, it was really cool around building the brand, telling the story, some of the marketing, et cetera. Because there are some franchisors that do it really well, and there's some franchisors that are probably really great franchisors, but they just suck at telling their story, getting out there, and actually marketing it. Like their franchisees are happy, they're making money, but for whatever reason, they're not connecting.
Yeah, and we see it. I mean, you see it all the time. And what's great about your YouTube channel is you're giving franchisees and franchisors insights and ability to connect. But what we see so often, and years ago also, as a franchise law firm, we took over a distressed franchisor, had legal issues. Um, we overestimated the legal issues, what it would take to solve them, underestimated what it would take to sell franchises, cured all the legal, rebranded, and ultimately resold the company successfully, avoided all litigation, didn't fight with anyone. I took the position of, hey, if you're not happy, you could leave the system, or if you want to stay, we'll support, rebranded. I'm happy to say it's very successful, but I gained so many insights. I mean, even as a franchisor, being at a franchise show, and not really being ready for the sales process. And so I could empathize when I go to a franchise expo or a franchise show in our firms there, and we have a bunch of clients, thankfully there, and I'll see franchisors that they're putting so much into it. They're new to franchising, or they're just not gaining traction. And you take a step back and you'd see they have a great business, but they're really not connecting the dots on their brand positioning, what they offer franchisees, franchisee transformation. And so along the way, we've taken those experiences. And so when we work with someone to franchise their business or existing franchisors that move over, one of the first things we do, in addition to all the legal, is we have a masterclass we put together for them. Really connecting what's their franchisee transformation, what do they offer, and really diving down into responsibility for franchisees, right? So your audience, I mean, it's a real commitment. When someone says we're going to commit our lives to your concept, what are those unit economics and can we perform? So um, that's where we're focused and having a ton of fun with it.
Yeah, and there seems to be, yeah, I haven't looked at any of the hard numbers or data on it, but there seems to be a lot of companies that are franchising their business now, where they're deciding to become a franchise, but some of them maybe shouldn't.
Yeah.
So what's your perspective on, a business knowing if they should franchise their business or if they should not franchise their business? And what's some of that criteria, that you really look at?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And some people get upset with me when I tell them they shouldn't franchise. And I would say of the new franchisors entering the market, say this year, I would anticipate for next year, I would guess that at a minimum, 10% shouldn't have done it. And I'll receive calls from, great founders, like, entrepreneurs who call me up and say, hey, Charles, I franchised 2 years ago. I'm not gaining traction. I've spent market money on lead generation. Something doesn't feel right. And there's And when we evaluate it, many times they just weren't ready to franchise. Their unit economics didn't support or justify franchising their business. In other instances, they didn't have the right expectation. They thought franchise sales were easy and they didn't need capital. But the criteria I look at, the three base criteria I look at is industry, unit economics, founder. And founder's the most important. Founder mindset, leadership team. Industry, that's pretty easy. So for example, at a macro level, what industry are you in? And even if your business is ultra profitable and high performing, do you have a crowded franchise marketplace? Right? So are there a number of franchisors in your industry? And if there are, that may not indicate to not franchise, but you need to know you're going to have an increased budget, and we're going to have, significant competition. So industry, unit economics, and that gets evaluated multiple ways, not only how their corporate locations are performing at the gross sales level, gross profit level, cash flow, but how likely it is for those unit economics to translate to franchise locations. So that's our second factor. Third is founder mindset, which is I could take two new franchisors, same industry, same unit economics. One will be successful and succeed at a high level with a multi-million-dollar exit, and one may not succeed at all. And to me, it's about the founder mindset. Do you understand that we need a 5-year vision, 5-year plan? Franchise sales are difficult. More important than that, in most cases, we want to season the franchise offering, which means in the first 2 years, you probably should only be selling 2 to 3 franchises. They should come about organically, and you should be focused on supporting and over supporting them, amplifying your system. Can you as a founder see that today maybe you don't have a call center, but you'll have one 3 years from now? You don't have an internal marketing team, but you'll have one 3 years from now. 3 years from now, what do those first pioneering franchisees look like? Do they validate? Do they have good unit economics? Have you built around them? And then at years, 4 to 5 and plus, we scale. If that mindset, at least for our clients and people we work with, if that's attractive and other things align, those are the types of clients we work with.
Mm. Yeah, man, there's so many directions I want to go with this now, because there right now there's the world of FSOs, right? Which maybe for people that don't know what an FSO is, probably be helpful for you to explain that. But essentially, they work with different franchise concepts, and then they do the sales for them in the franchise development and bringing on franchisees. And so a lot of the times, you're like, what I'm seeing is some of these franchise brands, coming out of the gate, bringing on 25, 50, 100 franchisees or territories a year. And maybe they're operating off of one corporate unit that they had and then building from there. But what's your perspective on some of those franchisors that are exploding really fast, where they haven't really quite had the proof of concept yet, which is tricky, because a lot of people are buying a franchise typically because there's a blueprint, but they're selling faster than the concept can be proven, especially in different markets. So what's your perspective on that?
My intention with this podcast is to help you build your empire. If you've gotten a single piece of value, one of the best ways you can help me and the podcast is to simply press the like button on YouTube. Lastly, share this podcast. Share it with someone who is an empire builder. Imagine the impact you can have by helping them learn something that can build their business and empire. People will associate the value they got from this information from you, the person that shared it with them, all because you shared it with them. I appreciate you and your support. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, that's an important topic, and one that I have certain pet peeves. So it all depends on quality, right? Like anything else, you have high quality FSOs that when they onboard a brand, they're focused on, do we believe this leadership team has the right capital to also support? And then there's others that are just focused on the quick sale. Now, in a minute, I'll share too. Anyone listening, the biggest thing that concerns me when I see these new brands, I could share as an experience. One of our clients, amazing founders who did season their franchise offering. And over a 5-year period, looked like a slow growth company and maybe just had 10 franchises at a certain point, but performing well, built up, and then worked with a high profile FSO. And in my opinion, it's what works in franchising. They've scaled, they've grown at a big level, and it's worked, right? But what no one sees behind the scenes is they were franchised for 6 years and they were building that platform and they built the validation. Now, what you're bringing up is something that bothers me, which is we'll see new brands come online. And again, I'm not being critical, I'm just being cautionary, which is if, so for franchise buyers out there, where I would be worried is, look, I'm a big believer in emerging brands. I believe in entrepreneurship. I believe the right emerging brand startups can transform your life in a big way, right? And I may be biased, those are our clients, but I see the meetings, I see the conversations, these people care, and just amazing brand builders. So, but what you do need to be careful is when you have a new franchisor, let's say in a service-based industry, and they have really good numbers. Well, to your point, you have to take a step back and say, this is only one corporate location. Does this extrapolate to me as a franchisee? Or this is one corporate location in a really big territory, and there's a lot of economies of scale and efficiencies there in terms of marketing dollars, in terms of cost factors. So does that extrapolate? And then how are they presenting their item 19? And are they doing it in a genuine way? If you're just saying, here's our gross sales numbers, divide it by number of trucks, and that's what you should expect, let's just be cautious there, right? So I think there's tremendous opportunities. I think there's amazing FSOs and amazing brands that scale through them. But on the other end of the platform, you need to be careful with certain item 19s and whether or not you could extrapolate data and those sales practices. I mean, I see good FSOs where they're like, we love the concept, but we're not so confident in the ability to support, right? So there's a lot of variation, but I share with you concern about, because I do think you could find a new franchise, and one of our clients I'm thinking about that scaled with an FSO, where at 10 locations was probably one of the best opportunities in the country, right? Something I'd recommend to a family member and have. So there's those great opportunities there. It's just you have to filter them out.
Yeah. Which is why, doing kind of due diligence is so important. And you talked about, item 19 and disclosing the financial side of things. Man, item 19 is tricky, huh? I mean, it's because there's no standard in terms of how it's displayed. So you got franchisors that, as you were saying, like average sale per truck, or maybe they list it in quartiles. You have some brands that will actually list the sales of every single location, which is pretty cool when they do that and show that level of transparency. But what do you think that franchisor should be showing in their item 19? And what's your here's an even more controversial one, which is franchisors that don't have an item 19. Like, why would a franchisor not have an item 19? So I know I just threw a couple of different questions at one time, but whatever order that you want to tackle those.
Sure. So look, I think the vast majority, the 95% of franchisors should have an item 19. And if they don't, I would advocate for a franchise buyer, with one exception, which I'll explain, to not consider the franchise. The exception, if you're dealing with a lower startup cost franchise, a lower startup cost, a mobile home-based business that falls within what I would call the lifestyle supplemental income category, then maybe there's legitimacy as to why there's no item 19. which could be a number of reasons, right? So I represent franchisors, and a reason could easily be, hey, Charles, I sold a bunch of franchises to franchisees. They love their investment, or, we're on great terms, but it's a mobile business and they're just not working hard. Their life is going on, and I sold, so the numbers are going to be really low. And I think it'll cast a negative light. But on the spectrum, look, if you look at a spectrum of expense and startup expense, here being restaurant, retail, brick and mortar, $1 million and up, and on the other end of the spectrum, low startup cost, home-based business, as you move up in the investment level, there's a stronger need for an item 19 and a deeper dive, right? On the other end, if it's just a lifestyle type franchise, just throwing something out, maybe a children's enrichment that I'm doing based on my passion and just to supplement some income, I could understand maybe why. I would prefer the item 19, but that would be an instance. On the 95% of other investment options, you need to have an item 19, in my opinion. To
Yeah.
your point,
Yeah, it's interesting to see when companies don't, and that people will still go out there and buy those brands in sometimes pretty quickly, and I think, interesting. So like a new franchisor, like starting out, you made a point earlier when you talked about, new franchisor considering if they should franchise their business, and there may be a lot of competition in the marketplace. Like at what point does someone who wants to franchise their business, or kind of in the beginning stages of that, go, it's just too crowded? I mean, how many more boutique gyms do we really need? Or boutique fitness places? It's like, but every now and then one will kind of crack through and really start kind of flourishing. But it seems like with some of those type of brands, there's a life cycle to them, and they may run for 5, 10, kind of 15 years, and then they'll die off. And I think you could probably say that in any sort of business overall. But I guess at what point, like when someone's coming to you and saying, hey, Charles, I'm thinking about franchising my business, like at what point is that conversation like, hey, maybe it's not a great idea?
And that's a great question, because that really gets, like, I guess no one realized we needed another burger concept until, when Five Guys came around, right? And so you have a completely crowded space. That's where I really hone in on the founder's story. Can they lead, create a tribe, and grow the brand? So we have clients that, one that I'm thinking of 12 months ago, franchised in a very crowded space, right? But the founders are very unique people. They're inspiring people. They actually, not because of they went through our masterclass so when we launched, they had an FDD that made sense, definitely a crowded marketplace, but we had the right plan in motion, which was, let's build organically, people that know you, that are fans of your brand, and more important than anything else, to connect. And so the first thing on their website is their story, not about buying a franchise, but why they woke up one day and started this business and how it changed their lives. And now they're inspiring others. We sold 5 franchises. They're supporting. I'm like, now we're in support mode. So it really comes down to the founders. And this is where I see the big opportunity. I see these new entrepreneurs, they put their trust in businesses, companies, they become franchisors. I'll see them at these shows and I'm like, I don't know anything about you as a leader. And what's worse is everything's sort of homogenized about what you're offering as a franchise. Maybe it turns out your low startup costs, mobile-based business where we could add territories and and create that tribe. So again, I'm not being biased. Our clients, they're just interesting people and they're brand builders. And so to me, that's critical, because you're going to be following that leadership. And so if I see someone in a crowded space that I don't believe, not because they're not strong enough, but just the way they're wired, and what their goals are. If they're not ready to lead their mini movement, then I'm going to throw a caution flag for them.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, you mentioned before about how important of a factor the founder plays in it. And it's really no different than actually being a franchisee, right? Because although you have different markets and uh, there is variance in different markets for franchisees and how that can impact their, potential success. Um, but a lot of it comes down to the franchisee. At the end of the day, what is the biggest difference that makes someone's business successful? Well, it's them. It's how they process information. It's how they make decisions. It's how they implement or execute. It's how much they procrastinate or not. It's, it really does come down to the individual, which is tricky because some people don't want to accept that. Right? It's like some people are, or they are unaware of how they show up. Like I've noticed that where, we may have people that reach out and want to work with us, and I'm thinking, I don't know about you going into business. Because like you've been, I see things like sloppy, right? If I start seeing things like sloppy, the way that people respond to emails, or they respond with one or two words, they don't answer all the questions, I start to look at the little things. And I think I'm a little bit picky and probably maybe a little over the top with some things, but there's this phrase of how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think there is some truth to that. Do you recognize that in terms of, is that part of what you see as the difference between some of these franchisors that become successful? Like, is there a direct correlation between how on it some of these founders are versus ones that are maybe a little bit looser style, taking, calls while they're multitasking as opposed to being present? Like, these are some of the things that drive me crazy. Maybe it's because I'm just so OCD, but then sometimes I see people that still kill it despite doing those things. So what do you see from your perspective in terms of the difference of success and how the founder shows up?
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast episode so far. One of the most consistent things that we hear from people that reach out to us is that buying a franchise feels really confusing. There's so many options out there. It's a scary decision. They don't know how to vet or do the due diligence or really narrow down on the right franchise for them. And then they really feel alone in the process. You might be the only one in your family who's ever pursued buying a franchise or being an entrepreneur. Or maybe you've tried to start a side hustle before, or other businesses like me. Like before franchising, I was not able to crack the code on entrepreneurship. I'd like to invite you to reach out and work with us. We've helped many clients buy franchises, get them profitable, or buy resale businesses that are thriving. I'm talking about highly profitable resales, great value. We've allowed many of our clients to actually quit their job right away and replace their income immediately. So if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise, doing due diligence, vetting it, or resale, then go ahead and go to tarjohnson.com/consulting, and we're happy to see if we can help. All right, enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I love that introspection, because I haven't really thought of it from that perspective. And as you're speaking, I could see in my head, I could see certain clients, and when I see them when I think about them, I'll always see them smiling and positive. And you're right. There's just some that will succeed, and I don't want to be negative. There's some that succeed, and I'm not saying clients, that I just question, how is this possible? Like, where are these universal principles of accountability and doing the right thing and giving, taking less than you give, and but the universe always compensates, and so there's a part of that equation. I think the universe needs some of those anomalies to succeed, but I will say absolutely. So are the clients, the franchisors that achieve high levels, are the people that are smiling, are the people that are always reading and learning, the people that are very thoughtful about what they're about to do and how they impact other lives. And that's really big.
Yeah. Yeah, it to me, it's very interesting to look at. So, what do you see the differentiator between the ones that are having success and growing versus the ones who aren't?
So what becomes in for franchisors out there, and again, let me just take an example. I go to a franchise show, I see the franchisors there. They're great people, and they've bought into this franchise industry and advice from other companies, and that's fine. But when they go to these shows, I think every franchisor needs to reset every year. What are we offering? What's the transformation we offer? What are the three uniques of our franchise concept? Real uniques, not training, support, $50 billion industry, all the nonsense terminology, right? And really challenge yourself as to what you're offering. And in a very genuine way, very serious. How do you answer a very serious question of, hey, new franchisor, why is investing with you right now the best decision for me and my family? Right? You need to focus on that. And if you do, you're really going to do a deeper dive into what you're doing, your goals, your mission, and really refine where you're at. So we'll see new franchisors, they've been franchising a couple of years. First, and I don't say this because this is what we do as a law firm or part of what we do, some of them just have the wrong FDD. They're a mobile service-based business, but their franchise offering is based off of as if they were a retail brick and mortar business. And what does that mean? Their territory structures don't align, their item 19. So there's so many opportunities we see for franchisors that maybe got the wrong start. But the next is where everyone punts because it's so much easier. Everyone's going to congratulate a new franchisor. Congratulations, here's your FDD, which I tell them they will get a congratulations email from me, but just know that I'm not congratulating them. And like now the work starts, which is everyone jumps to sales on your website. What's the transformation they offer? What is your founder story? What are the three real uniques? What are your unit economics? Can a franchisee do it? And how do you help them do it? And if you're not answering those questions at a deep level, then you're not ready to sell franchises.
Yeah, that's a great point. The founder story is key too. It's, you do an amazing job of creating content on YouTube and really engaging. And I know a lot of the clients that we work with, like 98% of our clients come from watching on YouTube, and connecting with my story. And a lot of folks, they say, hey, I connected with your story, I could relate, and we probably would not have been able to get to this point, I think, without that, because there is so much competition in the space. And for a service that is traditionally free, we do things in a very different manner in terms of, but it's because of my founder story, right? Which people, connect with. And how has that, going off track a little bit, like how has you creating content and sharing your story, journey, experiences, how has that impacted your business? Because you've worked with some really big name brands and some of the more successful franchisors, in the last, few years, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, if I could even just take a step back on reflecting on what you're doing on YouTube, right? And this is to share with franchisors out there, and to your point about telling their founder story. When we're offline, and we spoke a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that struck me in the most positive way was how genuine you are about your mission, about helping franchisees. And I was just, like, you can't fake that. But what also becomes interesting is the reason you're connecting is, well, you're opening yourself up and you're being genuine. And the other thing that I love about being forward facing with, you become vulnerable, but you feel an obligation to make sure you're always delivering at a genuine level. And I saw that in our conversations together, just sharing like the type of added value, you're adding for. So for us, it's had the same impact. I mean, we're very fortunate to receive a lot of referrals from our clients and stuff like that. Um, but it just amplifies the connections. I mean, people will tell me, Charles, I know your mannerisms and when you're going to say certain things, right? Or I know when their eyes are rolling when they speak with me because they've heard it already, right? And so, and as much as we do on YouTube, we actually do a lot too privately for our clients in knowledge base and stuff like that. So it's been great. What I love about it, I think it keeps you accountable. Like, it becomes, you make that human connection. You realize like life's short and you want to help others and, in turn help your team. And it creates accountability. I don't think you could fake who you are. And that's why we have our clients on our YouTube channel, because I want to get them exposed to telling their amazing stories, right? And so we ask them to go through our branding workshop. It's totally optional. We don't charge for it. It's our clients. Our marketing director, Melissa, who's amazing, will go through it with them. And then, if they'd like, they could come on our YouTube channel. And I find it's a great icebreaker for them to start letting the world know what they're about. In fact, I was so happy yesterday. We were in a planning meeting and one of our clients emailed us, newer client, amazing female entrepreneur, just amazing, amazing brand. And like, hey, Charles, we did these things. Can we come on the YouTube channel? I'm like, absolutely, right? So it's been very empowering. It's been a complete shock for me, but positive. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm always curious with do you feel like the franchise sales process has gotten more aggressive? I mean, I think you've been in this industry more than me, but I think in some particular environments, some franchisors may be a little bit more aggressive than others in the sales process, and some are a little bit more like, hey, here's what we have, here's the process. If you want it, great. If you don't want it, great. And some are actually kind of like really selling people. But what's your perspective on that? And then do you see a trend and connection to like franchisee satisfaction afterwards? And do you even get involved in, are those conversations that franchisors are having with you?
That's a great assessment of like the variation in the industry too, of the very sales focused and aggressive versus here's what we are and what we do. And I'm not just saying this. I may be biased. I'm not going to oversay because I don't want to. I don't see a lot of negativity in the brands we work with. And in fact, if there's an issue with a franchisee, our first mode of operation and our clients is to coach them of, hey, we could send a team and help, but also if you want to sell, we could help you resell. And those are the positive experiences I see. For those franchisors, I would call the process, if we went from completely passive to overactive selling, I'd say it's right in the middle. They want to close the deal. They want to be very candid about everything. They have a great process, but they're going to stick to their principles and right. Because you can have on both variations, the sales process where they're overselling and the sales process where they're like, take it or leave it. They could be equally bad, in terms of the outcome for the franchise buyers, So I think, I don't know statistically, but my gut would tell me is that you, as a franchisee, you should be evaluating that sales process because it can be a big indicator for. So if you have the over aggressive or you have the take it or leave it, the take it or leave it could be brand new industry, amazing item 19 numbers, but not tremendous validation or franchise base, and everyone's jumping on a hot trend. Be cautious there. And then overselling and over explaining, you got to be cautious there too.
Yeah, you mentioned validation and franchise buyers, and we talked about this when we connected about a week or so ago. Is just a franchisee validation process, and a lot of franchisors these days have either group validation calls or they have some pre-recorded validation calls that people can listen to. And I think a while back I may have been a little bit more cynical than I am today, with a different perspective in terms of, I think the intentions are good. People are busy. Franchisees are busy. And I think I shared anecdotally with you when we owned our franchises, after a year and a half, 2 years in, I wasn't really returning those calls, those franchise buyers that were coming in that they called me out of the FDD. And, after what, in the beginning, I mean, I'd spend an hour with people, so generous with my time. Then it got old. You get into the thick and thin of running your business. It gets really hard to do that. And so I think that from my perspective, franchisors are trying to protect the time of their franchisees so that they can focus on running their business and they're not getting bombarded with calls all the time. And, and then make it more efficient in terms of like the group validation calls. But I guess from a couple different perspectives, you mentioned like you got to be careful in terms of, from a liability perspective, of steering, right? So like what is the balance between what franchisors can do and what they can't do in terms of steering clients while balancing protecting their franchisees' time?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There's no clear answer, right? It's all balancing. From a franchisor perspective, assume you're in litigation X number of years from now. What are they going to claim about that process, right? And what are going to be the claims they make or not? So, I mean, I agree with you. Years ago, I was suspect about the pre-recorded in the group, but there is a very valid reason for it in terms of efficiency. I think franchisors just need to keep complete balance on how they're approaching it. And franchise buyers should still try to reach out and have those one-on-ones if they could get it. But I'd love to say there's an answer. There isn't, because there's a push and pull. Lawyers like to say, don't do it, and every lawyer that wants to cover themselves, I agree. But like, we have the reality of franchise sales and the whole process.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we actually my wife and I we're in due diligence process ourselves with a franchisor and a resale that we're looking at. And it's interesting because the franchisor is huge. They're a very big franchisor, very established, really good reputation. And but we got sent a PDF with a list of 15 to 20 franchisees and their contact information. And of course, I'm kind of respecting their process. I'm going to started there, emailed all of them to set up the calls. But what we find because one of the things that we do is teach buyers due diligence and how to kind of do it properly to make sure they're protecting themselves from the beginning, is a lot of times they don't even know that they are allowed to reach out to franchisees that are in the FDD, right? And of course, like, if I was a franchisor, I am 100% going to give you the names and numbers of people that are happy. Why would I send you someone who's pissed off? It doesn't make sense. Think about it logically. Anyone listening, if you were a franchisor, you would do the same thing. It's not that you're trying to manipulate anything, but it's like, really, I'm not going to send them to someone who's pissed off. But right. But it's interesting that, so I guess, do franchisors, like, should there be a caveat and an asterisk of, hey, here's a list, but you can reach out to whoever you want? Is that the proper way of doing it from a legal
That's what
standpoint?
we advise our clients to do that. And it's smart, because here's the list. And by the way, go to section blank of our FDD and there's a complete list of every franchisee. And I think that's smart. I think it's good practice for any franchisor.
Yeah. And from your side of things, like and we can start to kind of wrap from here is, you know, shifting perspectives, you know, from a franchise buyer's perspective, like what are some, because you see the franchisor side and you're on that side, so you have an inside look. So I guess what are some red flags for franchise buyers where maybe they need to slow down, do some extra due diligence, or you know, just how they can make sure to just make sure that they're making the best decision for them and their families as they're going through the buying process.
Yeah, it's a good and tough question. I think let's let's start from I think a foundational mindset that I think is valuable for franchise buyers, which is understand that if you're dealing with a startup or emerging franchisor and any franchisor, understand there's people behind the brand. So a startup emerging franchisor is an entrepreneur, right? And their franchising venture and growing their franchise network is a new venture for them, just the way you buying that franchise. And if you're dealing with a more mature and established franchisor, then just understand what's behind the curtain are management team members that may have worked at different franchise companies, franchise sales, it's corporate America in a certain way. So understand first who you're working with. Because if you're dealing with an emerging franchisor, red flags, one red flag is assessing the founders and who you're going to be partnering with, right? Do you align with them on values? Do you align with them at an individual level and at a personal level? And do you believe in their leadership? So the first red flag I'd be looking for is a lack of alignment with leadership team, leadership values, how they operate, right? I think that's a big, it's sort of intangible, but it's a big factor. Basic red flags, financial performance, right? Overestimating the item 19. So if there's high, low, average, median numbers, don't assume you're going to be at the high end of it, right? What does it look like if you're at the average or on the lower end, right? So evaluate that. I think another red flag for me, a big red flag, two brands, identical industry. One has a significantly higher item 7 estimated initial investment. Why? And you look at it, well, they're providing more realistic estimates on things like build out or equipment or vehicle. Two, they may have higher estimates for marketing and reserve capital. One of the biggest red flags for me, if I'm a franchise buyer, and especially if I'm buying a service-based business, how are you going to make those web chats go off, my phone ring? How do I generate business? Item 7 says I need 5,000 initial marketing. Well, what do I need after that? Is that a realistic budget? How much money do I need to be budgeting for sales throughout the next 12 months? I think one of the biggest frustrations I could see with franchise buyers, lack of alignment on expectations. Hey, I bought this lower startup cost business. No, I didn't realize I need to spend $5,000 a month in marketing. So I would be looking, red flags would be anywhere where I could find misalignment, leadership team, values, okay, item 19, but what is it going to take to generate those numbers? And is the team genuine enough where they're telegraphing to me what my marketing budget should be and how they're going to help me do it? So I'd be very honed in on marketing.
Yeah, marketing is so key. Yeah, it's interesting. I tell folks that work with us that their number one most important role when they open their business is to focus on sales and marketing. And it's usually the area that franchisees have the least amount of experience in terms of what I see, because a lot of the folks that tend to, I think, go towards a franchise can be a lot more operationally minded people, because some of the really brilliant sales and marketing folks are starting their own thing, right? They may not be gravitating towards a franchise overall, but it's actually an owner's most important role, because it doesn't matter how good your operations is. If you can't bring in customers, you got no one to you got no fulfillment on the back end, anyways. So, last question is what are you seeing as the future of franchising, and what excites you right now about the franchise industry?
What what excites me the most is it does work. Franchising works. It changes lives. I had a conversation with a friend who's an attorney, not in the franchise world, and I was sharing an experience, and his natural conclusion was, and they didn't do well, and it was a disaster. And I'm like, no, they did great, and it changed for the franchisee, their family, and built generational wealth. And that may be with one of our clients. So franchising works, and that's what excites me the most. I think it's it is definitely a vehicle where you can build wealth, and for franchisors where you can actually achieve things you never thought possible, going from that local business to a national brand, having a team member who started off and was just an administrator in your office and is now in charge of 20 other people in your franchise whatever department. So the transformation is there, and that excites me the most. I think the franchise industry, like most, is shifting in terms of sales practices and processes. The marketplace is very broker driven, and brokers themselves are entrepreneurs and business owners. Um, I feel like there's a shift where franchisors at the base level and franchisees are going to have so much information and ability to connect. I feel like they can become more empowered, and that's where we're focusing on. So I think that also excites me. I think franchise buyers, they're smart. You need to do your due diligence, and franchisors, they're going to be able to make those direct connections, and you know through platforms like the one you've created, and quite frankly, our YouTube channel and what we're working on with our clients, I feel like that's very empowering. So I think there's going to be more direct relationships, but there's a lot. There's no question in my mind at this stage, and not the fluffy stuff like just the generic like why franchising is great. Franchise opportunities could be a disaster if you pick the wrong one and the wrong franchisor, and there's plenty of them out there. But for the special ones where I tell one of my sons to invest in, those opportunities are also there. So I think there's a lot of good things ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's exciting to see how things are growing, and I think the reality is same thing. I'm cautious to really want to kind of protect people from the bad ones, and just make sure that they have, good experience, because there's some. I mean, you could walk away with just a completely different perspective, and just making sure that you pick the right one. That's really where it all starts, is picking the right franchise. So cool, man. Charles, thanks for coming on to the Franchise Empire show. Look forward to having you on again at some point.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate what you're doing. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.